And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Hi, I'm National Weather Service Meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska Marine Weather Outlook on this Saturday, February 17th, 2024. We'll be taking a look at how marine conditions will be affected here for Sunday into Monday. But first, with the Saturday afternoon sea ice, we find the ice down here into the southeast area of the Bering Sea. Areas along Bristol Bay, there has been melting and a reduction in ice because of a milder southeasterly flow of air with temperatures that have been above freezing along the Bristol Bay coastline. We still have ice in place, though, along the Kuskokwim Basin as we get outside there, Kuskokwim Bay and downwind of Nunavik Island. There may be a little westward movement to the ice around and north of St. Matthew, but here across southern ends, we're going to see winds trying to become more south easterly to maybe southerly along the edge of the ice here going through Sunday. And then areas of ice in Cook Inlet have shrunk a bit, certainly not as extensive as what it was a week ago, but still a fair amount of ice there through the middle inlet. And we are going to see a push of milder temperatures. Anchorage could see highs back up in the low to near mid-40s here Monday into Tuesday as a push of milder air comes up out of the North Pacific along the Western Gulf. Looking at the low pressure systems where they're located on the surface map, late tonight, early Sunday morning, we have a strong low located just north of the western Aleutians in the lower Bering. This low will track eastward over the next couple of days. Low pressure over the North Pacific south of the Gulf is not really going to move to the northwest like the systems did here a week ago. In fact, the overall pattern is beginning to change thanks to the fact that the big high pressure that was not just at the surface but in the mid and upper levels of the atmosphere is breaking down, kind of sliding southeastward and weakening. So this is going to allow the Bering systems and the North Pacific systems to move east-northeastward. And that's going to result in a pattern shift as it becomes more active. We could see heavier precipitation along the Gulf Coast into the Panhandle mid to late week in the week ahead. So by Sunday afternoon, we have low pressure located up there to the north of the central Aleutians, the occluded front washing out, but there'll be a pretty good push of moisture coming in along the west coast into the western interior Monday through Wednesday. So there'll be more snow, blowing snow in this region, and likely some winter-related advisories or warnings come Monday. Another impulse of low pressure coming out of the North Pacific will help draw warmer, milder air back up around and above 40 degrees across Kodiak Island on into Cook Inlet for Monday afternoon into Tuesday. And then back here along the west coast, there will be areas of precipitation, mainly snow and blowing snow. So again, there could be additional advisories here from the northwest coast all the way from just southwest of Wainwright down to the lower Yukon Delta. So stay tuned to later forecasts. For marine concerns, Monday, lighter winds across the Panhandle. North winds 10 knots, Lynn Canal down through Stevens Passage. Southeast winds to 10 knots there, Dixon Entrance. And we're looking at waves just a couple of feet. For the outer coast, winds southeast to east around 15 knots, swells generally near 9 feet. Monday, winds come down even further, variable winds around 10 knots, waves a couple of feet there within Lynn Canal, Stevens Passage, and down through areas around Ketchikan and Metlakatla. In the outer coast, southeast to east winds 5 to 10 knots and swells 6-7 feet. Northwestern Gulf, Sunday, a little break in the wind, east to northeast winds 20 knots here, lower Cook Inlet, the entrance of Cook Inlet. Northeast to north winds around 10 knots. They are within Prince William Sound, the north end of Cook Inlet, and then off the Kenai. Northeast winds to 20 knots with swells maybe 10, 11 feet. Winds pick up again as that push of milder air lifts northward. Southeast winds increase to 30 knots there just outside of Kodiak Island, and then there into lower Cook Inlet with swells of 10 to 11 feet. Southeast winds also outside of Hinchinbrook Entrance and Prince William Sound around 15 knots. And northeast winds still holding there up in the upper portion of Cook Inlet. Along the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island on Sunday, we're looking at 15-knot northeasterly winds within Shelikof Strait, variable winds off of Kodiak Island on the Gulf. Variable winds 10 knots or so within areas around Bristol Bay and through the middle peninsula. But once we get back down toward the end of it, Cold Bay, Falls Pass, southwest winds 15 knots, waves 6 to as high as 9 feet there north of Cold Bay. And then for Monday, with that low pressure lifting northward across this region, strongest winds will be there around Kodiak Island and just east of Chiknik, 30 knot southerly winds with 10 to 12 foot swells there in the western Gulf and North Pacific. We find winds southeasterly there, Bristol Bay 20 knots, variable winds around 10 knots closer to this center of low pressure, and then winds turning back to the west there south of Falls Pass at 15 knots. The Aleutians have had quite a strong storm work across the west. Winds are going to be coming down, though. Look for the eastern Aleutians, south-southwest winds 20 to 25 knots, 30-knot winds around between Atka and Adak, and then southwest to west gales of 40 to 45 knots there west of Adak through Kiska, Shemya. Low center passing just to the north and northeast of Shemya, and that will slowly fill as we get into Monday and Tuesday. Still low winds, eastern Aleutians, southwesterly 20 to 30 knots once you get west of Nikolsky. 30 knot southwest to west winds there around Atka to Adak, and then 35 knot west to northwest winds at Adak westward through Kiska and Shemya. Along the southwest coast, southeast winds at 10 knots, Bristol Bay, south winds into Kuskokwim Bay around 15 knots. South winds around the Pribilof Islands to 20 knots with swells up to 14 feet. Easterly winds out of Norton Sound, the lower Yukon Delta at 15 to 20 knots on Monday. Southeast winds 15 to 20 knots there within Kuskokwim, Bristol Bay. Southerly winds to 20 knots, 10-foot swells there around St. Paul, St. George. Easterly winds to 15 knots out of Norton Sound and along the lower Yukon Delta. Strongest winds will be up here across areas of the Bering Strait on Sunday. We're looking at northeast winds 30 to 40 knots there on the north side of St. Lawrence Island. Potential there for blizzard conditions at times, at least through Sunday morning, early afternoon. Areas along the lower Chukchi Sea, northeast winds at least 25 to 30 knots, but as strong as 40 knots there around Cape Lisburn to Point Lay, where there still would be winter weather advisories for blowing snow. And then along the Arctic coast, east to northeast winds 15 knots with ice there in place. And then Monday, look for east to northeast winds along the Arctic coast from Kaktovik through Utqiagvik. And then down along the Chukchi, still those 40-knot northeasterly winds there along and off of Cape Lisburn. More easterly winds, lower Chukchi Sea before the Bering Strait, 20 knots out of Norton Sound. And then south of the Bering Strait, look for east to northeast winds at 15 to 20 knots from Wales and Port Clarence to the north side of St. Lawrence.